Hello and welcome to Community Topics number 30 of Dualistic Community. I am feeling everything right now. How fucking funny is it that, of course, leading up to this episode, the things we're about to talk about, we talked just before this on Patreon about just being everything, this all being your dream. And I have been tripping for the past 2 hours, and it just keeps getting deeper. And I took a little hit of my weed pen a little while ago after that last call and before that last call. So I am just really feel like I'm feeling everything right now and prepping for this call, like the energy side of it. I feel like there isn't a division necessarily between my hands and anything else, my body and anything else. So anyway, that's what I'm leading with.
And I am delighted to leave it at that because this is going to be a fun conversation. Today's community topic is specifically about Reiki, but I'm going to expand that to include all types of quote unquote energy healing, including Qigong, healing touch, modalities that are very similar. And it's because ultimately we're tapping into the same mechanism, but we're doing so through different practices or with different concepts. And so I'm excited to get into this. I don't know if our listener knows this, but at one point in my life previously, I went through Reiki teaching. I became a Reiki master teacher. I have taught Reiki previously, though not for very long. I think I managed to teach two people Reiki before I started questioning the whole thing and it started to fall apart. And this kind of goes back to a conversation we were having earlier today, where I will admit that learning Reiki was useful to me. And I will equally admit that it is not necessary for me to teach somebody else what was useful to me when I can just take the lessons that I learned from it and pass those on to that person, saving them a whole lot of hardship and an unnecessary trip. That all said, I'd like to start off with the recognition that everything in reality is an expression of energy, is an expression of electricity and an electrical field of some kind. Each and every cell in your body is made up of atoms, and those atoms never touch. They are all surrounded by a field, and the field interacts with other fields. And that is what we are doing. So when you look at your body right now, if you look down at your hands, what you see is skin and flesh and blood and bone. What's really there is vibrating energy in different variations and different forms that your brain and your eyes are interpreting according to the light that reflects off of that energy. So what you're seeing isn't what's there. When you envision in your mind blood flowing through your body, even though that is physically what we would see if we were to look inside your body, it is actually not what's happening. What's happening is that energy is moving around your body all the time. Not only is it moving around inside your body, but the movement of that energy actually creates a field around you as well. So not only are all of the cells in your body interacting with the field of all the other cells, but you and your field are interacting with all of the other fields created by all of the rest of us. And on that note, I'll pass it to Andrew.
Oh man. Yeah, okay. So I said it on Patreon, we're probably going to start in the deep end with this one because that's how I'm feeling. So I don't know, because quite frankly, when it comes to Reiki and whatnot, like not super familiar with the practice, what it means, the intricacies of it, but I do understand the sort of transference of energy. And even Melissa at the retreat did some Reiki type thing. So I have a familiarity with just the even just the impact or just what it's sort of like I got a glimpse of it. But through that recognition that we're all just electrical energies, fields, all those sorts of things, like as we know, as we've talked about so many times, it's all you. And so, as much as there's the perception of the different energies and energetic fields, it's all one sort of field as well. Like those are not divided. And from the egotistical perspective, we could perceive my energetic field interacting with your energetic field, but your energetic field is my energetic field as well. And so, as much as there is the interaction, and I'm curious, like, because we understand that division is merely conceptual, but we are made out of energy, like, how much of the interactions are like two energetic fields, if you know what I'm trying to say? Like, there is no actual division in all of reality, and yet there's still a quote unquote transfer of energy that happens, but like, is it that? Like, I'm curious just from your perspective and your familiarity with Reiki, like how it works. It makes sense in the recognition that it's one energetic field, but the impact and the flow, like who's doing it? And I know it's you're doing it, but I guess it makes it easier when the idea isn't so much in the way.
This is going to be a fun conversation. So, throughout this entire conversation, I really want you to try and keep in mind two things. One, that we have the experience very much like being a cell within the body, because we are massive. We are the entirety of everything, but the entirety of everything includes everything, and all of those things interact with all of the other things in one way or another, no matter how far removed. So we have the perspective of being a cell, which means you have the perspective of having a field and interacting with the other cells. Your subjective experience is still, everything is still you. And that's all you interact with. For example, if I were to hit you in the face, what's happening is that my field is interacting with your field. Your field is then sending signals to you, which you are interpreting as pain. And all of that is just the transfer of electricity. Now, what's interesting is that we say electricity or we say energy, and that's not it. It's really important to keep that in mind when we're talking about this. Like, we say energy or electricity. At one point, we would have called it spirit. The point is that we use words to describe what's there. And in our efforts to describe what's there, we end up creating a concept which is always divisive. So in this case, you're asking how my energy affects your energy, because technically there's only one of us. That is true. But how does one of your cells affect another cell if there's only one of you? Because you are that much, right? So it's not that they're mutually exclusive. You and I can have the divisive experience while still being the same thing. And what's amazing about this to me is the fact that we are all experiencing this continuous creation of reality by virtue of what we are. Like, it's not that we're creating reality so much as we are reality, just continuously creating itself. Reality continuously existing, but it's always continuously existing from the perspective of I. So that's not just true for you and me, that's true for every one of your cells. So even your cell is having the experience of its own bubble, of its own universe. That is all it knows. And it's interacting with other cells that are in their own universe of all it knows. And that's the paradox, is each and every observer is the all of everything from a certain perspective. And all of those perspectives are intimately tied together. And we call that an energetic exchange. We call that interacting with one another. But the reality is, it's just the movement of you.
So it's almost like, because it's just interacting with yourself. We have the perception that it isn't, but it's just like, your two fingers are both you, and they can have an experience. Like, even when you get close, you can kind of sense it before it touches, because they don't actually touch, is the fascinating part too. And so, as much as, yes, it's one energy field, there is still the experience of interaction. And it's just because it's one thing interacting with itself doesn't mean it can't interact with itself. And so with, the energy and the feeling, because something I wanted to bring up was that I've talked before about how I meditated for like basically every day for 3 years until I realized, closer to the reality of what I am or that I'm not what I think I am. I continued to meditate for a bit, but then it just started feeling like, just sitting there with my eyes closed, I'm already enacting, life has sort of become my meditation in that sense. Kind of irrelevant to what I'm about to say, but part of my daily sort of meditation routine was going through and like feeling my body from head to toe. And so I don't know. You sent me a video before this of a guy like using chi basically to set something on fire. And I don't know if that they don't talk about the meditation he did every day to like get to a point where he could do that. But it kind of, as I was watching, I was kind of imagining, feeling, the energy moving through different parts of your body. And if you have your attention enough, you can feel like a electric feeling throughout and sort of tingles. And so that meditation part of my routine, I had like fucking 5 things I would do every morning, but this was one of them. I would sit there with my eyes closed and feel from my head down to my toes, and I would feel every little part of my body, and then it would come back up from my toes to my head, and I would feel everything. And then every time I finished by shooting that sort of feeling out of the top of my head and then allowing it to go through that and then back through me more quickly out the bottom of my toes. And I would do that a few times. It was very much a real experience. Like I could feel it being then outside of my body as well. And now it's like, yeah, no shit, because it's all you. Of course, you can travel that attention and the feeling that comes with that attention out of your body. And I did that for 3 years. And so I don't every day anymore, but now I can very quickly tap back into that feeling and feel it very strong. And I would even part of it before I would do like the shooting of it out of the top of my head and back through my body, through my toes. Like I would expand, not expand, but like accentuate or exacerbate the feeling inside of me. And sometimes I would like count to 10. Every number I would feel it more and more and more until I felt like I was shaking, and I would just be like, oh, that's just me shaking, shaking myself. But it's like it kind of was the feeling creating that. And so I was just as I was, looking into Reiki and energy, I remembered that I would do that. And then watching that video, the guy doing, all of the work with chi, like it very much, I started to just feel that feeling again inside of me. And like it hasn't really gone away. And then realizing simultaneously with our Patreon call, just again, just getting smacked in the face that this is all me. Like I started to look around and be like, why couldn't other movements happen of me through this utilization of energy? So I guess bringing it all back, that's a lot of stuff about just that experience. But it sounds to me, without having much knowledge of chi or Reiki or any of those things, like something that could possibly be similar to that, and just being able to drive your attention to different parts and then like almost come out like even right now, like you could say my hand, but I'm feeling all of my attention in my hand right now, and it's like shaking a bit. And I don't know with the pulsing stuff. Anyway, sounds kind of like it, so I'm curious.
I'm really glad this came up. And the reason I'm glad that this came up is because what you just described is very much what is being taught or expressed in terms of the Kundalini yoga, or a Kundalini awakening. It's that experience of your energy moving up and down your spine, out the top of your crown chakra, and then back down to your root chakra and through, right? And that's the experience of it. People meditate for years trying to accomplish this. And they learn all the concepts, and they learn about all the chakras, and they learn how to do the special yoga poses and doing that whole thing. And it's always just right there. And you don't need to learn any of that shit to access it. None of it. Because it's just there if you take the time to feel your body and pay attention. And this is why I will always direct people away from learning things like the chakras. It's not like they're not interesting. It's just unnecessary. And there is a temptation there to suddenly go and, oh, my throat chakra is acting up, instead of just addressing the mentality that you are currently embodying and paying attention to. It's very easy to start focusing outwards to the concept rather than back to the reality. Even the concept of energy, the concept of chi, this all gets in the way of the reality. This is what I learned from Reiki, especially because in Reiki, there are symbols that you are supposed to use, focus on. Some people draw them in the air while they're quote unquote doing Reiki. And the symbols themselves are only supposed to symbolize specific intentions or even specific states of mind, let's say, healing, courage, that kind of thing. And so you use these symbols as a way of focusing your mentality, as it were. Most people don't look at it that way, though. I'll tell you right now, not all Reiki teachers are equal by any means. You will have people who will say things like, I need to consult my guides. They will talk about speaking to archangels. There is a lot of stuff that goes in there. And the reality is that the more of them there is, the less actual Reiki is happening. But those people will often blaze through the certification program, quote unquote, certification program, to become a Reiki master teacher. And they will never put any actual time into feeling their body as you did. They'll learn the symbols and they'll be quick to whip them out. Oh, I feel much better. And it's all just a placebo. It's all just the ego, once again, pretending, because it has a concept that it can play with. And so when we're talking about this stuff, including your own energy, remember, your own and energy are all concepts that kind of betray the point, right? It really does come down to the reality of what you're feeling, the reality of what you're experiencing, and your willingness to question it. Your willingness to question whether or not you're sure what you're feeling stops at your skin. Whether you're willing to question if you really are separate from the person that you're interacting with. So, that all said, I wanted to mention very quickly the video that Andrew is referring to. You can look it up on YouTube. It is featuring a person named John Chang. John was found in Java, I believe, and is a Qigong practitioner. He's fairly well known in that area. There actually is a book about John Chang regarding what he can do. In the video that Andrew's talking about, not only was he able to set fire to some paper, but he was also able to take an LED light and light it up using nothing but his body's bioelectricity. He was able to transfer that electricity into another living being, into another person, to the point where they were visibly shaking from the experience. There's a lot to the video regarding John Chang, and I would recommend that you watch it, but do so with an air of skepticism, because I don't want you to look at that and believe it. I want you to ask the question, is that possible? That's all I want you to ask. And don't answer it. Don't answer it, because it's not answering it that might lead us to one day recognizing that it is. It's not answering it that will lead us down the path of exploring the possibility. So don't answer it. Let's just wonder, because it's important. And so I wanted to tie back very quickly to the simple reality that the human body is constantly creating energy between like 80 to 2000 watts of potential energy within your body. And that's just based on how much movement you're doing, whether or not you're sitting still or you're sprinting, for example. We're not even talking about the potential energy created by, let's just say, the difference between alpha, beta, theta, and gamma waves, right? We're not talking about any of that, because honestly, we don't know. But what we do know is that there are certain things that are observable and have been shown regarding Reiki and healing touch. And I want to make this very clear. We're not saying it's the modality that's doing this. What I'm saying is that it is the reality of connection that is having an impact. It doesn't matter if we're doing it under the guise of Reiki or healing touch or Qigong. The practice is getting out of the way. The practice is you not being in there. And in that reality of connection, without your ego in the way, just spending time together silently, it has been observed that it relieves tension, it can relieve headaches, It can reduce pain, including after surgery. It can speed up healing, and it stimulates cell growth.
Okay, so this is like the one note I had before this, just thinking about Reiki and the impact and just like the little that I understand about it. I was thinking of, if you're trying to do certain things or I was trying to think about if you're with someone else and they're going through something, do you need an agenda in order to impact it? And what I came to was no. Like, because the agenda is the root of what's getting us to the shit that we're dealing with. Whether it's, maybe it's not immediately noticeable in the shit they're going through, but like the root of it is having some sort of agenda. It doesn't mean that, you having an agenda for a certain thing is like, now I have a headache. It's not like that sort of thing. Like the agenda is causing the headache, but like there's a root that is, and the narrative, the desire to have an impact on something else, or the fear of something else having an impact on you, like that perception of a division is the root of the ailments, basically. And so I was trying to think through it, and I was like, so how would it work then if, agenda, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's because that's the baseline. The feeling better, whatever happens through Reiki, is the baseline that we've deviated from. And so as a Reiki practitioner or whatever, you having any sort of agenda is just going to get in the way of the impact you could actually have. It's because that agenda in them is what's, the root, eventual root of the thing as you dig into what they're dealing with. And so you having no agenda almost brings an equilibrium back. So it just makes me curious, like coming to that, it's like, oh yeah, that obviously makes sense. It's like whether it's being an example of not having an agenda, just allowing that, the energy that they're embodying to see like this is a possibility. You don't have to have all of that on top of this baseline of being quote unquote healed. It makes me wonder, like, at first I was wondering what they're doing, but it's their lack of desire to do that's doing the thing. And that would make sense. So it seems like everything that Reiki teaches, or all of the things, are actually reducing the impact of just being there with them without being a label, a narrative, a master, a teacher, doing the fucking symbol sort of things, are all actually hindering it. It's not to say that it can't work without all of those things, but it's almost decreasing the impact with each and every idea about it that you cling to.
Beautifully said, and absolutely true. And I will say this even from the perspective of quote unquote doing Reiki. A client who is quiet and attentive to what they're experiencing, who's doing the work on their side, what I'm saying is what I'm saying, to feel and be in their body during the session, gets way more out of it because they're the ones putting into that experience. Right? Whereas if they're talking the whole way through, still telling you about their drama, telling you about their ego, telling you about how they identify, so on and so forth, they don't get much out of it at all. There's still some benefit, but it's not to the same degree. Same is true if the Reiki practitioner is just talking up a storm throughout the session. And that's happened. There was a Reiki practitioner in the last city that I lived in who would actually burp during their session because they were releasing negative energy. Loud burps throughout the entire hour session because it was helping them release the negative energy that they were taking from you because they were saving you, don't you know? And immediately you're like, wow, nobody's going to get much out of that session at all. And that's kind of fucking nasty, right? And the point is, though, there's this mentality that it's me doing Reiki. I'm a Reiki practitioner, and all of that takes away from it. The fact is that the deepest experiences happen when there is neither you nor the client interfering with whatever the hell is happening while you're together. None of this is any different than anything we've been saying up until now regarding conversations with other people and being yourself. Even when you're being yourself around other people, it feels better. When you have a room full of people being themselves, it feels fantastic. Who's to say that that in itself is not healing? but we actually have to take it, separate it, make it a quiet little session between two people where we are focused on the healing process. But who's to say it isn't easier than that? Who's to say that we aren't always potentially doing Reiki on one another based on the mentality that we embody? And isn't that exactly what we were getting at in the community topics about frequency and vibration? That we are all collectively participating in and manipulating the Schumann resonance. And you can call that whatever you want, but it is our collective energetic level.
It's funny because we always have the perspective that things need saving. Like this person needs saving, the world needs saving. And it's probably me remembering that George Carlin skit you sent me a couple days ago. But the whole idea that like, we need to save the world. It's like the world's doing just fucking fine. If we just get the fuck out of the way, the world would go back to equilibrium very, very quickly. And the whole idea that like we are actually so high on ourselves that we think that we could have a significant impact on the world even is funny. And so that we don't need to get into that, but I do want to talk a little bit more about that in regards to, climate and everything. But not for another day. But it's the same for other people. Like we have the narrative that, and as a practitioner of any degree, the idea that there's something wrong with this person and I need to save them. I need to do something in order to fix them. When it's almost like the baseline is being saved, being healed, like everyone's totally good and they have a narrative on top of that that fucks with the baseline. And then we create a narrative of their narrative, how we need to save it. And we're just fucking doubling down on the bullshit. And so there's like this exponential trajectory that we're on right now towards just fucking ourselves even harder, not recognizing that everything baseline is good. Like everything's chilling, everything's fine. And it's all the ideas like, oh, we got to save the world. We're just fucking it up even more. Like we keep building on top of this base that's like totally fine. If we just step out of the way for a second, if we just let go of ourselves for a moment, like everything that we do and I know I'm going beyond just the energy and Reiki stuff, but like everything that we do is on top, like building on the idea that everything's okay. And so our idea of ourself needs to be built in a certain way, which the desire to do that is just fucking shit up even more. And so coming back to the Reiki and energy, the idea of us being a Reiki healer or a Reiki master is actually fucking up the baseline that would be completely fine. So, it makes me wonder, and you push back hard on this, which is, if you're not saying I'm a Reiki master tongue in cheek, like, are you doing more harm than good with the people that you're interacting with? Like, is it even coming back to equal impact, or is clinging to any idea that you're doing something to them actually fucking it up more?
Absolutely. And that's empathy, right? And it depends on the Reiki practitioner you talk to. Some of them will tell you that I'm not doing Reiki. I'm just here and Reiki is happening. And I think that that's far closer to being the truth. The danger there, of course, is believing that some energy is doing the healing rather than it's just you untethered and uninterrupted by what you think should happen. And I think that that really is the power in everything that we're talking about all the time, is that we want to heal. Our body wants to heal. It's our continued egotistical habits that often get in the way of it healing. And there is no difference between our body and our body collectively. I think that humanity or life wants to heal and that it is being hindered largely by those egotistical habits. And that includes identifying as a savior. That includes holding on to spiritual concepts. That includes holding on to ideas and philosophies that are long since past, that could have evolved into a new insight and created something even more powerful to pass on to the rest of you. But we're so busy trying to feel spiritual. We're so busy trying to feel like we are somehow above where we used to be that we don't recognize that where we are is where the power has always been.
And that's it. Like, we are that baseline of being perfectly healed, perfectly fine. And as a society, we can't fathom, because it's not in the ego's nature to step back, to let go, to get out of the way. That's why I think this probably was from the same bit from George Carlin, the war on fucking everything. The war on drugs, the war on cancer, the war on this, the war on that, the war on X, the war on Y, the war on Z. It's all a war on something, because that's ego. Ego and war go hand in hand. The ego is always at war about something, at war on unhappiness, because we have to do something in order to be happy. The war on, like, fucking anything, and that's just in its nature. Like, it can't not be at war with something. It needs something to fight, because it perceives there to be something besides it. Its perception of division almost necessitates the war on something, because it has to do something. It has to prove that it exists in some way, shape, or form. And stepping back, letting go, dropping the narratives, it ceases to be. It can't exist so much through that. So it couldn't possibly understand, letting go of the idea of yourself. You don't have to think about yourself quite so much. Like, what the fuck? I can't. I have to, or else I die. And so it needs all of those things. It needs the doing of something in order to exist. That's why everything's so counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive to the ego, because without it, without all the things that it's doing, it isn't there, because it never was. So it needs those things in order to survive.
Isn't it funny? It always comes back down to the same recognition that we are the answer to our own problem. It's just that we've run from that answer for so long that the problem seems unsolvable. And it's just that it has to be unraveled one bit at a time, in the same way that our own need for self-importance needs to be unraveled one bit at a time and recognized where it comes from. Right? Not vilified, not avoided, looked at, recognized, and dealt with self-honesty. Right. I'm afraid because I perceive division. Right. I want to save people because I perceive division. Right. I am people when I don't perceive division. And that's all they need me to be, is whatever they need me to be. I don't need to be something for that. And that's Reiki, energy healing, however you'd like to call it. It's just getting out of the way and allowing reality to exercise the intelligence that reality is, that you are, and that your client is. We're all the same thing. It's just how divided from that we get. That really does exacerbate how much we suffer. And getting out of the way, we can amplify how fast we heal, which is very exciting.
Absolutely. So it all comes back to the same recognition. It all comes back to that point, the point that we're all avoiding, because the depth of that is being alone. It's just you. And so any sort of interactions are merely with yourself. And it's always the idea that you're not just interacting with yourself. It creates the distortion, it leads to the suffering, it leads to the ailments, it leads to all the shit. It's the same in the body. We look at cells. If cells start acting independently, boom, cancer. Perceiving division. That's all it is that perception that it's not one with the body doing its thing, always in its perfect spot. That's it. Like, we're always in the perfect spot, and we have the perception that we're not. We're always exactly in the right spot, perfect place, but we think we have to do something in order to get to the perfect place, be it mentally, emotionally, psychologically, physically. We always think we have to get somewhere else. Creates distortion with the flow. We have to do something. in order to have impact. We're always having impact. The more you can get out of the way, the more impact you can have, the more you can allow that impact that's already happening to continue to happen. And so the baseline, all this is being healed. So if you can get out of the way, have way more impact because that's what's happening. And it's like it's like the river's flowing and we're damming it up. All you have to do, be a good practitioner of anything, just get yourself out of the way, open up that dam, and the flow goes on.
Just pay attention. We know this. We know this. We know this even when we exercise. The more attention you pay on each and every muscle group, the better that muscle group performs and grows, right? We know this in terms of getting a cramp. You have to relax into that cramp. You have to focus on it, recognize where it's coming from, breathe through it, really let go. Yoga, same thing. Everybody's like, oh, I do yoga because it helps my body. Actually, what's helping your body is giving it the time and attention it needs so it can unravel all of those knots. It's just that yoga is the practice that you use to do that. It's the excuse that you use to sit down with your body without necessarily having to think about anything else. And that's when yoga becomes really useful, is when you sink into the pain and you breathe through it. And it's always right in front of us. We are life. So it makes sense that our default is to heal. We've just forgotten that. And again, there are so many things in the way that it's very hard to see sometimes because we're so self-destructive. That's all. And so, again, the most important part about all of this is to recognize that Reiki isn't some magic power. Healing touch isn't some practice that you need to learn and get certified in. It's part of what you are. We can call it whatever we want, but it really does just point towards the reality that you have far more impact on everything around you than you might think. It's not just your words or your actions. It's actually your state of mind and the energy that comes off of you as a result. And what's possible there? We don't know. In the case of John Chang, this is a man who spent many years learning Qigong. Qigong is a very ancient practice wherein not only do they talk about energy within the body, but they've actually gone out of their way to map how that energy moves into different vessels and different organs throughout your body. And this practice is several thousand years old. And so you have to give it a little bit of credibility based on the fact that it was based on observation. Observation, your observation in other lifetimes, in other bodies, right? And so that doesn't mean I'm encouraging you to go out and learn Qigong. What I am saying, in the same way that Andrew experienced his own Kundalini rising, we can experience all of the things that any of these practices are pointing at. They're all within us. The practice isn't the important part. The important part is you. The important part is your willingness to surrender to what you are and feel that without making assumptions. And once you've had a chance to get comfortable and familiar with that feeling, then you can start to explore it. And that's where I think things like John Chang, the ability to possibly perform miracles in terms of healing or anything else, I think that's where all of that might lie, is in that willingness to explore that uncertainty to a greater degree. But I think that that's going to happen as we commit to it individually and we see it reflect collectively. Perhaps we're going to change the entire Schumann resonance as we do this together.
Because it's not energy, it's not chi, it's not Reiki, none of the things that you think they are. All of the descriptions are never the described, but it's just you coming home, interacting with yourself, and getting clearer and clearer about how that interaction has always been the baseline. It's always just been you. Just coming back to yourself. So I think this is a fantastic way to finish this one off. This has been a lot of fun. I'm still definitely feeling like fucking pulses through my body. So it couldn't be better timing with the retreat coming up in about a week. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one as much as I did. We did. And I look forward to discussing this more in future chats. So anyway, I'll talk to all of you soon.
Bye, everyone.